This class, when I teach it by a lot of different names, and it really depends on the purpose of the class. Sometimes I teach the class as, oh, we're going to learn how to do a scribal hand from 1450. I just call it French Petard 1450. By the end of the class, I tell people, okay, congratulations. Now you know how to analyze a script, how to analyze your own calligraphy, and how to make your own Ductus. And they all go, what? But if I tell them at the beginning of the class, sometimes people get intimidated. Sometimes I teach it exactly what it is. And that is this class, as Helen kind of intimated, it's about analyzing calligraphy. Now, we're going to do it by analyzing somebody else's calligraphy who is dead, but we're also going to be learning this is how you analyze your own calligraphy as well. I'll take off my glasses because they're too shiny at the moment, reflection. But the reality is, if you can learn to do this with your own calligraphy as you go, it makes you a more mindful calligrapher, and it lets you see the beauty of what you're doing. And it also lets you see how what you're doing affects what's ending up on the ink on the page. And so being able to start see that allows you to start doing things you never thought possible. I know when I was first shown this and I was told this, I went, yeah, okay, whatever. And 6 months later, I'm doing things that I never thought I could do. So it is true and it does work. Just don't expect it to happen right away. So when we do calligraphy, we have some basic things we look at for a ductus. We look for X height. X height, for as a reminder, is the space from the base of the letter to the top of the letter for your A, O, X kind of letters, those ones that just stay between the waistline and the baseline. And we measure that by how many widths of the nib it is, because everything we do in calligraphy is a ratio. So generally, calligraphy letters are between 3 and 5. There are ones that are as little as 2 and some that are as great as 14. But 3 to 5 is pretty normal. And so, but when you're looking at the page, it's not like they put a ladder next to it or they're telling you what their X height is. So that's one of the things we're going to have to learn. The next thing that we talk about is the pen angle to the baseline being where the letter sits on. And the pen angle to the baseline is that going to be 30 degrees, 40 degrees, 90 degrees, 0 degrees? We don't know. And again, when looking at a ductus, it'll tell us, but looking at somebody else's writing, we don't know. And so we kind of have to figure out how to do that as well. And then the thing we figure out with a ductus is, well, how to put the pieces and parts of the letter together to form the letter, to draw the letter. And that's really what calligraphy is. We're drawing letters. I mean, yes, it's writing, but but the mechanics of it is far more like drawing than it is like writing. What I always tell people, no matter what class I'm teaching, if I'm teaching a script, I always say, I don't care how you get there. As long as the letter looks correct when you're done, you must have done it right. And so that's an important thing to remember when you're trying to develop your own ductus. Now, just because there's no wrong way to get to the letter form doesn't mean that there aren't more efficient and less efficient ways. Does it have to be efficient? No. Is it easier on you if it is efficient? Probably. And so one of the things that I search for when I'm looking at a script and I'm going to turn it into a ductus for myself is what strokes are they using repeatedly in the letters, or how can I use the same stroke repeatedly over and over in different letters so that I only really have to remember 2 to 3 strokes for any particular script. It's just a matter of putting it together like a jigsaw puzzle after that. Now, just because I look for it doesn't mean I find it, but it does help. So those are the things that we keep. Those are your three basics, aren't they? Now, the less basic things are ascenders. Those are the things that go above that waistline, above the O, the A, the X, and then, of course, the descenders that go below that baseline. And we got to figure out those X heights as well, even though technically it's not an X height. We got to figure out what that ratio is. There are scripts that want to have, for an ascender, just as much room as you had in your X height, and also for your descender. There are some where they only want half. And there are some where they want one measurement for your ascender and one for your descender. So nothing should be taken for granted. I have had I was very, very lucky to live a 15-minute drive from the Lilly Library at the Indiana University in Bloomington, Indiana. They have a gorgeous collection, and one of the things that they had was a page written by Alcuin of York. Alcuin of York couldn't keep his pen angle the same to save his life. At least not on that page. And so that's one of the things you're going to see when you're looking at a ductus is that pen angles don't always match the same. So if you really want to get down to the nitty gritty on analyzing it, you measure those pen angles or your X heights or whatever it is that you're measuring many and several times. And by the time that you have taken those measurements, you go ahead and get an average. Because once you get that average, you get the, oh, that's what they were going for. That's what the middle of it was. Because you're gonna see mistakes both directions, many directions. And so that'll work out just fine. It's a non-problem. But if you just go, oh, okay, I'll look at this A and that's how I'm going to write A's forever, you may or may not be writing the A the way that they intended it, is for lack of a better way of saying it. And so this class is going to have a lot of participation. And so, but right now I know I'm doing a lot of talking. So I'm going to go ahead and switch cameras, and I want you to look at something I wrote right before the class. See if I have it set up right. Mostly. See if I can get focused on that a little bit better. Oh, yeah, that's a lot better. All right, so we have two different scripts, both saying the word hello. Okay, one is on the baseline and one is floating. And this is typical of what you're going to see in manuscripts. Sometimes they're on the baseline, sometimes they float, and you got to be able to figure it out for each. Now, what I like to do when I have a manuscript, if I'm lucky enough to have a manuscript in front of me that's real, I go ahead and take pictures of it. Most of us will be working off of scans that somebody else did and very kindly put on the internet for us to find and maybe download if we can, or screen capture. Lots of ways to do that. So what can you tell me about this top script?
Lots of straight lines in there.
Okay. Important. Can anybody identify what that script is? Or roughly what it is? And if you can't, that's okay. Gretchen, you're talking, but I can't hear you.
It's in the Batard direction. If it's not Batard, it's close to it.
It's in the Batard family, and the Batard family is huge. So yeah. Okay. And the bottom script, I purposely miswrote it. So if it's making you go, huh, that's why.
It looks almost like it's related to an uncial.
It is a flat uncial, which is pretty rare to see, but they do exist.
There we go.
And I didn't quite write it well either. But that's the thing, is that there's no such thing as a perfect script. It doesn't exist. That script, that ductus that you saw in your book, yeah, that's that particular author's way of doing it that day. And honestly, probably pretty close to that every other day. But that's their version. That's not the perfect version. That's not the only version. And so every scribe has a slightly different way of doing it. So it's good to be able to look at a script and be able to say, hey, that's probably this. And that gives you a good idea of where to start, maybe. Or the characteristics that you're going to have to deal with or work with, and let you have a little bit more fun. So we've got the scripts more or less identified. Unshul, roughly 300 to 600 AD, and the first one being a Batard means probably 1450 to end of period. 1450, some people will tell you that's a little early, and my response is kind of depends on where you're at. If you're in England, 1450 is super early. If you're in Germany, it's been around for 50 years. So, all right. So, what are the three things that we always look for in a ductus?
X height.
X height. Not that I can spell tonight.
Angle.
Angle, pen angle.
Slope. I don't know whether you mentioned slope.
I didn't mention slope.
Okay.
Because slope usually, you don't usually find slope in the ductus.
Okay.
So we have
Ascender.
X height, pen angle.
Ascender.
I'm sorry, what?
Ascender.
Well, there's ascenders, descenders. What am I looking for? Why? All of a sudden, I can't
Ratio?
remember the three things. We have X height, pen angle,
Ratio?
which is X height. Well, whatever it is, I'll remember it later, obviously, or not. And,
Well, and you mentioned your baseline, but they're all sitting on baseline.
well, that one's not.
That's true.
And so we're going to have to learn how to deal with it. All right, so X height. How do we find X height? This is a script. This is somebody else's writing that's on a page. So how do we find it?
Well, can't you put something, like a tracing paper over it and then do the marking?
You could, absolutely. Now that you've done that, does that tell you the X height?
Tells you the height of, oh, yeah, you got to figure out what pen they're using.
No,
Well,
no, you don't. And that's what you need for your
Nope.
X height. The
Nope.
short, simple way to say it is you find your X height by finding the fattest part of the,
Part of a
of the
letter.
line.
right.
Okay.
Okay.
And typically, that fattest part of the line typically is going to be the opposite of your thinnest line. So if my thinnest line is like this, then my thickest line has to be like that. And so this right here is my thickest line. Not that my focus is doing very good today. I can't get it, but I can at least get it better than that. Oh, there it is. So what I use is a divider. What's a divider, you ask? That's a divider. A divider is a compass with 2 points instead of 1 point and a writing implement. Okay? And the nice thing about them is that they can be set. So I take this and I go, well, does that work? Oh no, it's not quite wide enough. All right, I open it up until I can get the tips exactly on it. And by tips, I mean that very, very top point. All right, so that is roughly the width of the pen. If you do it from this way, you can start to see it a little bit better because it's not casting its own shadow. All right, so that's roughly the width of the pen. Okay, well, what is that? I don't know. I don't need to measure it. I need to. Never on the manuscript itself. Never, ever, ever on the manuscript itself do you mark it. However, you take pictures and you print them out.
Hi.
Okay? And then you can draw all you want on that picture. And then if you're smart, you use a T-square and you draw a line straight over the top to find that waistline. Oop, I missed. That's okay.
Why you never do it on the manuscript?
Well, that and you'll get killed by the librarian.
Librarian.
All right. Yay. You know. All right. So, and then I can draw a straight line there. And then I go, okay, great. I go, that X height is 1. I stick it in that little hole there again. And I get 2 and 3, and I'm at the top. I'm done. Hey, the X height is 3. That's it. Now, if you don't have a divider, you can go ahead and measure it to the best of your ability. You're going to, it is best if you use millimeters. And you're going to have to guess where between the millimeter the line is. You know, is it halfway through? Is it 3/4 of the way through? Is it 0.6? And you just got to do your best guess. Unless you somehow have a measuring device that is more accurate than that. Does that make sense? Okay, and then you can go ahead and measure that baseline to the waistline and then do math and just divide them, right? How many times does the thickest part here go into the number that is here? Guess what the most common number I found was over, I don't know, a dozen manuscripts roughly? It was 3.75.
That's very oddly specific.
It is very oddly specific. And I'm like, I don't know how I did that. But, you know, some were 3/7, 3/7, you know, whatever. And when I measured it all out after, you know, a dozen manuscripts, 3.75 was almost always what it was. Now, granted, I'm like, you know, I'm looking in, you know, academic books and Bibles is mostly what I was doing. I wasn't looking in prayer books. I wasn't doing psalters. Those were the ones that I was doing. Does that mean that I didn't have a good sample? No. On the other hand, I only did 12, and there's hundreds of thousands of manuscripts. So, you know, all I can say is those 12 came out to 3.75. But it's really interesting to me that none of the manuscripts where I've actually sat down and done a full analysis, or at least that analysis, came out to 2, 3, 4. Didn't come out to a whole number. Didn't come out to an integer. Not one of them. So I think in the SCA, we probably have too much of a love affair with sticking with whole numbers when it comes to our X heights.
Right.
Just a guess on my part, but something to think about. There's something to be said that, you know, your working stiff medieval scribe probably would not get a GOA level arts and sciences award in the SCA. Working in a cubicle, making his money. And that's an interesting discussion to have with people, by the way. It's always fun. So, okay, we figured out what the X height is. Now we need to figure out what the pen angle is. So what's the pen? How do we find pen angle?
The direction of your narrow part of the letter.
And I will only change that slightly. You are absolutely correct. I'm only change it slightly. I will say narrowest parts.
Parts, consistent
and make
parts.
it plural.
Yeah.
Because it's interesting that sometimes narrow parts on the same letter can change. And in fact, if you look at my H, my narrowest parts kind of do change. Now, my question is where are my narrowest parts on this? Is my narrowest part on the H here?
Oh, okay.
Is that the narrowest part?
Yeah.
I would, well,
say
no,
no.
it would probably be the end of your, yes, your ends of your serifs.
It's here, and And
Yeah.
whatever happened here, that didn't come to a point. So that's not it either. And normally this part's supposed to be your thinnest. That part's supposed to be the thinnest, but they're not. Really look for the thinnest. So when you do find it, you try and get it about as accurate as you can. Put a straight edge on there. Doesn't matter what it is. And then draw a line through it. And then on the other one, do the same thing. If they're actually parallel, be surprised. Yeah, kinda. Okay. Then the pen angle is here. Okay. Now we're just eyeballing this for now, but you do want to get a protractor out and actually check it. Okay. As I was telling you with Alcuin of York, his pen angle on Carolingian minuscule went everything from 33 to 57. And I analyzed every single letter on like 5 different lines over that page. Yeah, it came out to a like pretty darn close to being right around 40. Once I did all the measuring and adding it all up and whatever. And I'm like, oh, and so you stick it at 40 and you go through it and you're like, yeah, that makes sense. That's what he was aiming for. Because it's kind of the middle of everything. So it does work. This pen angle is somewhere around 50 to 60. I haven't done the measurement. And since I wrote it, it's not something you can check unless you want to take a screen capture and do it. All right, so we did it for that letter. How about the L? I think that's the thinnest for the L. Notice that this
Yep.
L has a mistake. You're going to see those. So how did that letter get formed? Well, it looks like they were trying to do that and something happened with the ink. Or maybe they brought it down too quick and didn't bring it over enough. And so you can actually do that analysis. I have a cat who wants to be my friend right now. So, you know, mistakes show us things, but right now it's not helping us. So we're going to switch to the next L. I'm going to say that's my thinnest line, although maybe that is. No, you are not allowed up here right now.
Yeah.
You've been
just
gone
tried.
all day, Daddy, and I need to see you.
Yeah, pretty much. And on top of
That's-
which, by the way, this is the neighborhood cat. He's kind of like the guy who sleeps on your couch and eats your food.
Yeah.
Kramer.
So, right, and then we also have the O, right? Now, interestingly, I don't think the O is parallel with the others. I think it's close,
Yeah,
but
mine
I don't
was
think it's
rough.
parallel. Yeah, it's not. But that's what you do. You go through and you figure it out by printing the things out and doing the work. And it's kind of fun after a little while. If you like any kind of puzzles, this can be pretty fun. Okay, so we have a mixture of pen angles here. I think we have everything from 45 to maybe 60, 55 here. Okay, well, when we think generally about Batard, most Batards are anywhere between 45 and 75 degrees, with most of them between 45 and 60. What was the scribe going for on this one? Well, since I'm me and I was the scribe, the answer is 45, but I apparently failed. And that's okay, because it's actually pretty consistent. It's not wonderfully consistent, but it's pretty consistent. So if we do the hello underneath, yeah, we've done a lot of drawing through it, but that's okay. The thick is pretty much here, and Well, the thin is here or here. One of the other things that you can look at, though, is the end of a letter. And we can look at this L, and that end of the L, 45-ish. This is 45-ish. This E, okay, yeah, maybe a little bit more than 45, probably about a 50. So looking at the end of a stroke like this H, that's flat. Well, not as flat as this.
Yep.
Well, wait a minute. How do we know it's flat? Because it's not on a baseline. Draw one in. Go to the bottom of the first letter, and then find the bottom of the last letter, and that's your baseline, maybe. And guess what? That baseline is not level, is it? It's slightly sloped. It's lower on this side and higher on this side. Oh, Kitty wants my food. That's what it is. So, but here it's not, it's pretty flat. It's so flat that we lost it when I drew the line in. It wasn't flat. We know that. So if you notice that you lost something, that's what printers are for. You can print it out again. If you really feel the need, but you could probably get enough information from the other ones, like right here. Okay. By the way, if your baseline swallows the bottom of everything, okay, well, the pen angle is 0. Now up here, I always warn people about the danger of the crossed E. Okay.
Yeah,
And the reason why I call it the danger of the crossed E is you can pull your pen perfectly straight across, and as you lift it up, it will thin. And if you are right-handed, you have a tendency to lift up toward the top of the page. And therefore, that makes this look like it's not flat, but more like that, doesn't it? But the crossed E may not be that way. So I warn you against using the flat of the E that's there, but using this flat of the E where it comes down is actually a much better place because it's the end of a stroke. Looking at O's tells you a lot. And if you can't figure it out on the outside because it's too round, go to the inside of it. And what we're getting is the pen angle wasn't consistent, was it? It's just not consistent enough to tell. We have a perfectly flat one right here. This pen angle was a little bit like this on the bottom of the H over here. The L is kind of that. The top of the O is here, and the bottom of the O is flat again. Now, I happen to know I was going for pretty flat to maybe 15 degrees, and I achieved that, but I didn't achieve consistency, did I? Well, considering that I've been sitting down for a grand total of, 4 minutes, and I wrote this in, one of those 4 minutes, yeah, I didn't expect to have a lot of consistency. But it looks okay. I'm happy with it. I'm just would never do that for a scroll. But are we getting the idea? If it's floating, you're going to have to draw your baseline in. If you want to get your X height on a floater, you're going to have to draw your waistline in. Yeah, that's not it. Pretty close, though. That's kind of closer. And tighten that up. There we go. And honestly, if you could, sometimes working under a magnifying lens or something that'll make things bigger does make this easier to do. Yeah, that X height is slightly more than 2. And you can do the same thing with your ascenders, right? The ascenders here are about 2, which is about the same as the X height. Since we don't have any descenders, we don't know. And it is never a good idea to assume that descenders and ascenders are going to be the same.
Yeah.
Now, here's the thing. If you're going to make a ductus out of another script, you have to come to a decision for yourself. Do you want to faithfully recreate this script, or do you want this script to be yours? If you want to faithfully recreate the script, you're going to do a lot more measuring. If you want this script to be yours, that means that you've done a script, it's inspired by it, it's based on it, but it's not exactly this Scribes version of the script. If you're going to do a faithful recreation of it, you don't get to say, this is the way it was done in 1450 or 5 AD or whatever it is. You get to say, that is how this scribe wrote on this page on the day that they wrote on that page. And we think that it was roughly whatever year. Because it's interesting to look how different scribes write different ways at different times of their life. So does all that make sense so far? All right. So that's kind of the basics. It's not difficult, but it can be a little detail oriented. All right. Now let's see if I can share screen. Now, this comes from a script, 1450. It's definitely from a French manuscript. And I forget exactly where in France it's from. It's on the other handout, I believe. Everybody should have a copy of this. I very handily did the first page so that we can all kind of see how to do it and how it's done once it looks the way it's, once all the stuff's been done to it. I was very lucky. I was able to use different colors, but this is all stuff that got printed out. And then I actually used markers. Fine point, fine tip markers to get the do things on it. So this one, the X height is 3.5. Did I get, and these are all floating, by the way, so I had to get the base height and the waistline on them. By the way, if you're ever going to do this for yourself, it's a really, really good idea to label what the letter is supposed to be. I've made the mistake of not doing that. And then if we look at this first one here, is that really an A? Or is that an O and an I stuck together? Oops. Can be problematic. And okay, I've got the C's, but why is there this letter or this other thing right here? Is that really a C or is that supposed to be another letter? Well, this C, almost always, if there's a letter following it, they don't not ligature it. They let it run into one another, so there's ligatures. Okay, no big deal, but now I know. If I don't label it as a C, though, it can be a problem. So, and what I do is I take pictures of the script, and then I move it, and then if it's not in a JPEG, I move it to a JPEG, and I put it in Paint. And once I have it in Paint, I just start doing that. Okay. And I cut out the letters that I want, and I pick them up and I move them somewhere else. For me, it's usually a Word document, but it doesn't matter what it is as long as you can use it. Okay. I stick them in a line next to each other, so I have the A's with the A's and the B's and the B's, and that way I'm not jumping all over a page. If that's what you want to do, and I know people who do it that way, whatever works for you is fine. For me, especially for the purposes of teaching, this is much better. Okay. And so we can take a look at the A's, and we see that on the first letter, we have the thin parts are roughly 36 and 36. But on the next day, it's 40 and 34. The next one's 42 and 28. And then we have 32 and 30, or 37 and 30. Did this person keep their pen angle the same? Yeah, guess what? Neither do you. At least, probably not. I did go ahead and put the baseline and the waistline together, but you notice I didn't do any measurements that you can see on what's my X height here. That is something that I will let you do on your own. Find those thicks, find those thins. All right. So that first page gives you an example, and so that you can use, and so we're going to move down to the second page where we have E, F, G, and H. Now notice we have any, oh, how you put it together. That was step 3. That was the third one. Okay. So we're talking about pen angles. If we were to draw this A, and we've seen 1, 2, 3, 4 of them, and you want to pick your more common specimens, if you see something out of normal, go ahead and grab those and maybe analyze it too. But definitely note that they are different, okay? Every once in a while, a scribe will use a letter from a completely different script. I was reading the script. I forget what the basic script was. And I'm looking at it, and this letter pops up, and I'm like, what the heck is that? Now, it was for digging deeper that was being done by Stanford, I don't know, 2007, I guess. And it turned out another Scadian was in the class and went, oh yeah, that's a Luxial A. Luxial minuscule. I think personally, my opinion on Luxial minuscule is it was created so that people could think that they could read it, but never could. I'm not a fan of Luxial minuscule. That is not to say it's a terrible script. Not a fan. If you like it, great. You write it. I'll be happy to send people your way. But yeah, it was a completely different script. It was the only time that they used that particular letter from that script, but they did it. So, you know, life gets weird sometimes, and scribes are fun. So how would we try and draw this letter? Oh, by the way, the numbers up here that I have up here, like these two pen angles are the same. This has a 6-degree difference in the pen angle, a 4-degree difference in the pen angle, a 7-degree difference in the pen angle. I did that for me and my purposes. And the idea is how much are we allowed to play with the pen angle? Are they twisting the pen on purpose? Is what I was trying to figure out. And in my opinion, that's a pretty small amount. And so it's just, I don't want to say carelessness, but a lack of exactness, but it doesn't seem to be pen twisting. Could be, just doesn't seem to be. So how would we draw this A? This is where y'all get to tell me what you think.
So I've been trying to determine, because it looks like it looks almost like they're drawing an O with then a bar added to the side on a couple of them. Or a C, or a C
Oh,
with a bar on it, because they're coming way around, and then you've got that funny point at the top of the A, at the
Yep.
top of the downstroke.
okay. Anybody else?
Are you talking about the first one? I missed what you were looking at.
EA.
Any A.
Yep. How would you draw this, say, for the script?
You start with the angle on the first one. You'd start with the angle, going, yeah, the top angle, then come down and then go up, and then go back up to the top and come down to the right. Yeah.
Okay. And then, so it would be here and then that. Or would it be here and then there? And then finish up here.
Yeah, however you want it.
Okay. That's a valid way to do it.
It's almost
I
like
know
a
how to-
floating
I know how to
crooked
spell it.
O with the tail added on, kind of like what the what our first person said.
Yeah, I think that's a absolutely valid description. For me, I had chosen to write this as stroke one up here, bring it down, come up. This stroke, come around, close here, and then this stroke is exactly the same as the first stroke.
Right.
So it's stroke one, stroke two, stroke one. Or stroke one is A, stroke two is B, stroke three is A. For lack of a better way of saying it.
So I wasn't that far off.
Did you form the letter correctly? Does it look like that? You were correct. You did it right. We don't have to agree.
Right.
Which is
There's
why I
not
tell people-
necessarily a way to do it.
Yeah, which is why I tell people the way I chose to do it after you all figure it out. Because if I tell you my way, you'll be like, oh, that's how we'll do it then. I figured that out after a class. I'm like, no, I want you to figure it out. Your way is just fine. And by the way, I'm not left-handed. If you're left-handed, you're going to draw this completely differently. The letter B. We have angles of 38, 41, 45, 43, 40, 42, 40, 40, 40. Holy criminy. 40, 40, 40.
And that's
All right, so they're
consistent.
probably shooting for 40. I don't know. We have an X height of whatever. My measurement on this was roughly that the ascender is 2 and the descender was around, like I said, 3.5. But the ascender ends up being half of what the X height is what I remember roughly coming up with. I'd have to go back, check my notes, or remeasure it. It doesn't really matter because it's something y'all can do on your own. But how would you draw this B? And I'll tell you right now, I completely changed the way this B was done, but because I don't like the ascender. But how would you want to draw this B if you could?
Well, I would start with the straight line on the left and then do the top
The backbone of the B.
the back part of the B.
Okay.
Bring it down and go up.
So bring it down here.
Yeah. And then go
And then what?
and go up to the right. No, on the bottom.
Oh, down
Go
here.
Are
over.
you going to go across?
Yeah. Like this?
Yeah. And then bring down the top part. That. Yeah.
All right. Yep.
And put your flag on the top. But I have trouble with these anyway, so don't listen. I always make them wrong.
I had trouble with bees and unchel, which, by the way, is the first script I ever learned. Okay. Anybody else? See, the more you talk, the more I get to eat my supper.
I
Eat your supper.
I am doing my long downstroke.
Okay.
And I'm finishing with the pen point at right at the baseline.
Uh-huh.
And then I'm coming to about midway to the two-thirds to the waistline. And I'm coming up. I'm circling down to the right. And then I'm bringing it across to connect to my downstroke.
Sure.
And then I'm coming about halfway up the angle on the top and drawing my tail across.
Mm-hmm. Now, here's something about this tail that I think is interesting. This tail
It curves down. Does it go? I can't tell whether that goes down or up.
Yeah, this one goes down and then up. This one comes over and like a trumpet. I don't know a better way to describe that. This is kind of a fat wave and stops. And this one just comes in and stops.
Well, it looks like it almost has that backstroke that you sometimes see on the L.
Hello.
Which would...
Can't argue. Perfectly valid. So what I did was say, screw that. I don't like this. Now, I started up here, just like both of you did. I brought it down, touched, and then came over a little. So I could have a little bit of a point so that when I come up here, which is just follow that line straight up. I mean, like, these are super thin. And then it comes down like this, and I just touch it, right? And they pretty much all follow that. Now, this line here may come over farther or shorter, but this bee, part of the bee, the bowl of the bee, is always just trying to connect to it. I don't like this. I hate this one. I don't think it's as pretty as it could be. Now, I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm saying aesthetically it is displeasing to me. If I'm going to judge somebody on a competition, I would happily give them all the points in the world for it. That's their choice. Just because I find it aesthetically displeasing does not mean it is wrong. But what I do is I do this one over here, and I come over and I swoop. I like this swoop. I kind of do what the top of the C here is, except I continue it further. I'm going to make a point. Now, I notice that I have on the B drawn another line here. See this line here?
Mm-hmm.
That's that imaginary line that doesn't really exist. Does the ascender stick out farther than the bowl of the B? And the answer in all of them is yes. So it is okay that the ascender over here sticks out a little bit past the letter.
Right.
Some of them, no. You don't do it. Now you're going to make a little mistake here and there, but the goal is to never do it. This one doesn't care. And so what I like to do is that if I've got the room, I'll take this and I'll swoop it all sorts of ways. You have room to do that. And you can make it your own the way you want to. Like this one with the trumpet, they probably came down, picked their pen back up, and then pulled it across. I can't say that that's what they did. I can say that's how I would do that to form it. And therefore I go, well, that's probably what they did. Well, how do I know? I wasn't there. For all I know, they pressed down hard on their pen and it widened out and did that. which by the way is a fun trick if you happen to be using a quill pen. You can get some pretty interesting results that way. And I'm pretty sure they did on a regular basis. What happened here? I think they had an ink blob, or they pulled their pen up and the ink decided that it didn't want to get pulled with it as it went. It just stopped. I don't know. But here's something that you probably didn't see, that I didn't see the first time I did it. Right here. They pulled it back down. There we go. All right, yeah. So you see that? It's faint, but it's there. Which then made me go back and look at these. And it's not there on all of them, but I went back, like this one, it's there. So, even though I do the long swoopy, if I need to, I pull it back and bring it in if like there's an L next to it, or an H. Or sometimes I just say screw it and make the swoop go through both of them. Pardon, I am tired. I probably should say, hey, let's have fun instead of saying screw it, but I apologize. So, yeah. Now, the C is interesting, and I'm going to do the C and the E at the same time. Because when we look at the E and we look at the C, they are pretty close to the same letter. And, you know, we have varying degrees between 41 and 46. So I find the C stroke very instructive and interesting. Because you'll notice that's not a full curve. How would you draw that?
So it's almost 2 pen widths down from the waistline.
Are you trying to say it seems to be about halfway down from the waistline?
No, well, it might be, but it's not. I don't think it's quite halfway.
Okay.
I think it's like 2/3.
Okay.
Yeah, I think they're sliding the pen on the pen angle down and then forming the almost straight bowl of the C with a little uptick at the end, and then coming back up to that top of that to the top of the waistline and flicking that little top.
Yep.
But it looks like they're sliding their pen down slightly away from the waistline before they start their curve.
Yep, I would agree. And if we look at the E, I think it is instructive as well. Now, the thing about the E that now here, see this E right here?
Mm-hmm.
There's your waistline.
Yeah, so it's rising above the waistline slightly.
Yep, and it does it on all of them that I was able to capture it. Which I thought was interesting. So does the C do the same thing? And the answer is it doesn't. It stays down below.
Right.
Officially. So for me, now let's look at the D here. It's an oval.
Yeah.
It's not even trying to be round. This one's kind of a teardrop, still not round. They're all ovaled. And so we come over and we come down. We come over and we come down. And this one came over a lot more, but we come over and come down. And when we start comparing it with that, with this, This is more curved, that's more flat. This is more curved, and that is more angular, but is it flat? No.
Mm-mm.
What I did, and this is one of the few times where I'll get ahead of you, is I combined all three. You saw it in my O of hello. Okay? See that? The way I draw that is the first part is the angle of my pen thin line. And then when I get to slightly above half or at half, I curve it. And you'll see me do a little bit better job of that with the E than with the O, because the O looks almost like I'm doing 45. But it really is that. Or to get the pen out. Let's see if I can not shadow myself. There we go. That's better. And so that's what I did, is I made the top half angular and the bottom half more of a curve. If I do it correctly, I'm going to shadow myself again. There, that last one's the best one. So that's what I chose to do. I'm obviously not staying within doing exactly what the script says to do, am I? I'm changing it because I want to make it the way I want to make it. And since I'm the scribe, I get to do that. Now, again, if I'm trying to make a faithful recreation, no, I don't. All right, so F, Paul S, they are interestingly controversial because their descender is interesting. Okay, assuming that the pen angle is supposed to be roughly the same for all of them, how many strokes does it take to make this F?
Least.
And go ahead and you know, say it out loud how you draw it.
3 strokes.
Okay, I can see 3. Anybody else?
Well, and then you've got your cross. So I've got 4.
Okay.
I didn't initially see the downstroke on the cross.
Yeah, and all of them have that downstroke that are allowed to have the downstroke. If it's too close to another letter, they don't.
I mean, it almost looks like an H. With
It does.
downstroke. But
it's not one. It just, they all, if there's a letter next to it, they will ligature to it. All of them.
One,
That's
two,
why.
3, 4.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm guessing 1, 2, 3. Where's the fourth stroke?
It's in the body.
Either
I'm
the
doing-
flag or coming down off the cross.
I'm doing 2 strokes in the downstroke of the body.
Right, exactly. And that is
It's
a
the only way
proper
you
to
can
do
get
it.
that weird shape.
Yep. There, you can do it in one stroke, but you have
Well-
to use a quill pen.
Yeah.
Not 2.
You can do it in one stroke with a quill pen
Right.
Or
Because
you've
you've got the
gotta change
flexibility.
pen.
because of flexibility. And basically what you're doing is you pull it down, and as it comes down, you can either twist your pen or you can begin to lift that right corner that's at the top and only go down to your bottom left corner and just keep pulling. And you get that with iron gall ink. You will not get it with modern ink. But if you use a quill pen and iron gall ink, you can do this in one stroke. If you're using a modern pen or not iron gall ink, yeah, you're going to need to do it in 2.
Are you meaning just the straight, just the line, not the crossbar?
Yeah,
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Yeah, I was
you
thinking.
pull straight down with the quill pen, and you lift it so you turn your elbow, your right-handed, your right-handed elbow comes up to parallel
Right.
with the ground, and that will lift the corner of the pen in a way as you pull down that you'll get exactly this. Once you learn to time it correctly, you will get exactly this. This cross stroke, you can just start it just like you would start this stroke up here, except you're coming up and over. And you'll notice one of the things to look for is what's going on here. Did this pull ink with it? By the way, I make ink, and I'm a big geek when it comes to ink. Surface tension of ink means that if you pull through it, it's going to pull some with it. Okay, you're not going to get a nice clean stroke. And so if you look for, oh look, we have a curve here and kind of a curve here, that tells you that they pulled through, as opposed to stuck it here and started and pulled straight across. If you don't have these slight curves, and it is looking very angular, like this one kind of looks angular, but down here it's a little curved. But if it's just angular on both, they started in it and pulled all the way, as opposed to they started over here and pulled all the way through. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's a little tiny detail. You're not going to get it. Again, you're not being. It's how do you want to do this? But if you're also trying to figure out how they did it, something to look for. Okay. This is what I consider the ugliest G in all of calligraphy. Again, aesthetically, I don't like it. It's pretty easy to draw, though. How would you write this?
It is basically a Y
Yep.
with a crossbar across the top.
One.
Not even a pretty one.
Nope, with one difference. The second part of the Y always has to be above the line. Every single one of them. And the first one can't be. Or minimally is. I don't
So
like
your
it.
G the second line has to be above the.
On the
Black-
G, they're the
Yeah.
same. Well,
See that?
Yeah. And so it's
That's-
always above?
Look.
actually, you know what it looks like they did?
They made a Y and put a cross on it.
No, they made a
Or-
T and then
Oh, I
and
see
then
that.
and then put a tail on the other side.
Yes. Oh, that makes so much sense.
I think it's a T with an elongated bar, and they put a tail on the side.
That's one way to look at it. And that's really good to be able to look at it in a lot of different ways.
Because, well, when you drew the line and showed where your waistline was falling, that looks like it, not the baseline, where your waistline was. Yeah. And you look at it and you think about making a T where you're just extending slightly above that waistline and then making your crossbar. That's
Mhm.
what it looked like.
It does. And I hate to ruin your theory. You're welcome to draw it that way. Absolutely welcome to draw it that way. Because again, it's about how you want to draw that letter. But let's look at this. There's that curve.
Right.
There's that curve. This one's too, you can't tell over here, really. It looks to me like they drew it all the way across. Now, again, draw it the way you want to.
It is ugly. I'm not making that G.
I chose not to.
Yeah.
What
It
I
is
do,
an ugly G.
what I do is I draw an O.
Yep.
Sometimes I put a tail on it up here, sometimes I don't. And then I do this,
Right.
because I don't like it. I don't
Yeah,
have
that is a dead ugly G.
Yep. I like the H. The H has, character. They all can have that little connection right there. Okay. All of them. And they all kind of look like the Grim Reaper's sickle, for lack of a better way of saying it.
It's got that line that circles back like the B did too.
Yeah. I like their H. Now, the letter that I have the most fun with on when I'm teaching the class is X. Oh, by the way, N, you can draw that in one stroke. M, you can draw that in one stroke. It's cursive, technically, because it's all one stroke.
Not everybody could do cursive.
No. So it's pull down, lift to the corner of your pen, come across. Pull down, lift the corner of your pen, pull it down. Now, interestingly, you'll notice that their ending stroke has two different ways of ending this. One is to curve it back on itself, and the other one is to curve it so it points back out. So it's convex and concave. Out, in, out, in. Both are correct on the last stroke of the M. Okay, the N, pull the stroke down, lift the corner of your pen, pull it across, bring it down. These, however, do not skip back and forth. They only show that. I don't, convex or concave depends on how you want to look at it. But yeah, and yes, this is an N. It's not two eyes next to each other. It looks like it's two eyes next to each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
But where's my eyes? That's what eyes actually look like. Not the same letter.
I have a question.
Sure.
When the first example where it comes in, I can't tell from here is if the M is the last letter of a word or if the M is in the middle of a word, if it made a difference what they were doing with their hand. Because to me, it looks like that first M would be the end of a word, and the other ones were maybe they were going on immediately to the next letter in the same word. But do we know if that...
One, I don't know, because, well, I'd have to go back and look at the full page. And that is the problem when you do cut it out, is that if you only analyze it this way, you're missing information exactly like the question you have. Now, the second one is, I never thought of that. Now I got to go look. Also known as, I hate you. That was a really good observation that I've never had.
Well, and my second train of thought was, and I can't really tell on that first M, when you're writing out, is there a point where you're stopping because it's the end of the word, or you're going on to the next letter, or am I stopping because I need to redip?
Right.
And that was two train of thoughts. But my first thing was like, well, if you're at the end and you're about to move the pen and start a new word, you've broken your flow. Whereas where they were going up in it and they were maybe going right on to the next letter, they were bringing that pen stroke up. I don't know.
That's glorious.
Let me know what
glorious thinking. I love it. And now I got to go look. I don't remember if I gave you the original pages or not, but if I didn't, if you want to email me, I have pictures of this manuscript. This is a manuscript I handled and took pictures of. So I'm allowed to share the pictures as long as I don't, as long as I'm not trying to put them in a book. I don't need to get permission. So you can look for yourself and make that determination yourself. That's really, really excellent thinking. Good job. All right, so here's our O. Very straightforward. It's an O. By the way, Q, it's an O with a tail. That's it. I honestly think you can make this with pull it down and bring it across, and then just bring this down and pull it down. It looks like a 9. Now, down to my favorite letter to talk about, the letter X. X, X, X.
See
Oh,
that last
X.
one? That
By the way,
last
which one's the X
guys-
here?
Oh.
By the way, the answer is that's the X. So, how do you draw that X?
The last X looks like I was taught in grade school, where it's a backwards and forwards C. The middle one looks like it's angled line and another one angling. But
Okay, that's a really good observation. Anybody else?
Yeah, I would say very similar, although I wasn't thinking quite a C because that's pretty straight on the first stroke.
Yep.
But yeah, it looks like a back to back as opposed to a
Does that look a lot like what it is?
the back half of an O and the front half of an O
That-
reversed.
That's how I draw this. Guess how long it took me to get to that conclusion?
years,
6 years after I first did the analysis. I'm like, and I was never happy with it. I was trying to, pull this down and across and then pull my corner up and there, or come up here and do that. No, it's just an O. Reverse the strokes. And that was when I was getting into trying to do things more efficiently. Because the other way I was doing it wasn't wrong. I got the result. I just wasn't happy with it. When I started to go for how can I turn my strokes into be more efficient, that's when I went, no. And started transferring and just switched my O around and went, yep, it works. So yeah, a backward C and a forward C. It's a good way to describe it. It doesn't quite work in this particular script, but yeah, it's a great way to describe it.
elementary school.
Yeah, wonderful. They have a lot of different ways of writing the V. These are not the letter B. They kind of look like the letter B. Going all the way up to the letter B. Which is why when you print this out, it's a lot easier. Obviously, it's not the letter B, because the letter B does that. And the letter V does that. And what are they doing?
Well, the middle one's a little weird, but they're making it very similarly to the way I make a lot of mine. So they're making a slight upstroke to your base, to your waistline. You're drawing a slight angle down, and then, well, if my pen will coordinate, because I'm doing as I'm talking, then starting below the baseline and drawing your opposite side like the half of an O. So I'm really looking at the third one.
One pen stroke.
In one pen stroke?
Yes.
Check it out.
Yeah, the first one could be done in one pen stroke.
The second one can be done in one pen stroke. The third one, no. Although it probably was. Because it comes straight down. But you see this right here?
Right.
There's
It's a
that
little
little
connection.
connector stroke. Now, did they intend to? Maybe not. But this guy over here did. But look at this V and this V. They're totally different than these
Yep.
other three V's. So you have two forms of V here. Okay, this V and this V observe the waistline and stay on it or below it.
Right.
But the 1, 2, and 4
Or
do not.
do not.
And that's okay. So you have two. You can pick, choose, or take them both.
Oh, come on, pen.
And by the way, the U really is two eyes connected with a ligature. You can draw a U in one stroke. And that's the thing about petard. It's not a cursive. And there's an argument to be made that it's a semi-cursive, depending on how it's done. This petard, I would say, is probably a semi-cursive. It's not fully cursive. But that V looks an awful lot like a B because they're mostly drawing it in one stroke, in my opinion. There are other ways to do that. Don't get me wrong. You can pull this down and over, lift your pen, come up, and bring it down. You can do it by lifting your pen, but you don't have to. And it takes a scribe that is good at manipulating their pen to be able to bring it up and lift that corner. Because what they're doing is they're having to go through their own ink. So for people who don't know, we've all been taught always pull, never push. Because if you push, you flick ink. A more advanced to intermediate skill is to push your pen up through ink you've already written on, and then continue your stroke in another way, and that makes it more cursive, and that's how you can get things like this. And because you've got the lubrication of the ink down, as long as you're not pushing down hard, you won't flick ink. Yeah, I think I learned that like the 7th year I was doing calligraphy. But I don't like 1, 2, and 4. I think they're acceptable. I just aesthetically much prefer 3 and 5. And so I do most of mine like 3 and 5, unless I cheat, at which point in time what I do is I take this very large swoop and then I add this swoop to it.
Mm-hmm.
I take the longs from 1, 2, and 4, and I add the short from 3 and 5 because I can. No other reason. No, it's not that letter, but it doesn't have to be because it's mine, and I get to do that, and so do you.
It would work really well if you were having a word that starts with the letter V.
Mhm.
And you've got an extended, you've got a letter that takes up lower space but not upper space,
Yep.
and you could use it to create balance in your word spacing.
Yeah. The name Valeria, kind of a pain, but if you play with your word spacing and you do that, it comes out beautifully.
Ian, do you recollect from when you were studying this manuscript whether this particular one uses U and V interchangeably or whether they're actually separate letters? Because depending on the time period, they did use U and V interchangeably.
So for me to be able to answer that question, I would have to be able to understand the language that is being written. I did not read the language that it was being written, so I cannot answer that question directly as a yes or a no. I can tell you though, they really are completely separate letters. That's the best I can answer that. Now, were they used interchangeably? I don't know.
It's sometimes possible that what you've labeled as a V is a U that comes at the beginning of a word, and then the one that you've labeled as a U is a U or V that's comes in the middle of a word.
Yeah, and I completely agree it's possible. I don't read the language, so I don't know, and I don't remember looking at it. Again, you have the document, so you can see if that's what they did.
That's a fair, I mean, understandably, we're not Latin scholars, so it's sometimes difficult to know what we're looking at in terms of actual words.
Well, yeah, and it switches from time to time, as she said. So I think it's an incredibly valid question. I don't read the language, so I cannot answer it definitively. I wish I could.
Want to take Latin.
Yep. There are letter Ys, but interestingly, the only Ys I found were on calendars that were rubricated. And by rubricated, I mean gilded in blue. And so,
And it looks remarkably like your V,
it
except
does, doesn't it?
extending below the line.
Yep. And that's how I draw it. I draw it just like the V, and then I play with the tail. So here's the letter Z. And I have to say that about 3 classes ago, somebody pointed out that that could be an ampersand. And so I don't know. Again, I don't read the language, so I don't know. But that is what I use for a Z. And there are a lot of Z's that look very much like this, so it's fair to call it a Z. Whether or not it's accurate is another story. Oh yeah, this S. We got to deal with the S. This S. This S has three forms. And one of them is impossible. The tall S is very easy. It's the F without being crossed. And this S here gives good pause and strong argument toward it being done in 2 strokes. This long tail down here is almost certainly being done by pulling the corner down, though. And as you lift, you do get this thick to thin. All right, so that's the tall S. Then we have a curved tall S. And as you can kind of see here, it gets pulled around. It's almost a figure 8. Very interesting. I've never seen another tall S this way. And then we have the short S. That looks like somebody decided that the letter E was not weird enough. How would you draw this short S? Because it looks like a short B, doesn't it?
I know how they drew it. Because I've made this by mistake.
Uh-huh. This is done on purpose.
Yes, but I know what I did when I made it by mistake.
And what did you do as opposed to what did they do?
So you've so typically what's happened is I've started on the left with my downstroke for my S, and I've gotten it a little low, and I've made my second downstroke for the right hand side, and then I've come in to make the bottom, to connect the bottom, and it's touching my left hand downstroke, and then I've come in low over the top with the top stroke.
Yep, that'll do it. And it probably is like, this is one of those that you could probably do in 1 stroke. Maybe this kind of adds some difficulty to that. So you can do it in 2 strokes. All right, so backstroke of the C, make an E, close it here. Make it, draw an E, and bring it around.
Hmm.
That's
And-
the shortest, easiest way to do this that I can find. And that again is not how I started. Okay, the other way that I did it, and again, and this can be done in 2 strokes, but I did it in 3, is I went ahead and did 1, 2, 3. Okay, so make your S, and then I brought it across, brought it down, brought it across. So make this bigger so it's a little easier to see my movements. Make an E, so make an S, start in here, pull it down, and then come up here, just like I would for the E. And then instead of stopping here for the E, come over here and pull it down. And that's the other way that you can do this in 2 strokes. Yeah, I like that until I realized it's just, I don't know how they could do that. It never quite looked right, even when I used a cool pen. So, but the thing is it doesn't matter how they did it. It matters how we want to do it. And it matters, does it look the way we want it to look when we're done? That's what matters. It's your ductus. Okay. And so it's very easy. And we've all done it. I've said it myself several times, and I've heard you say it several times, you as in a general group. Oh, that's how they did it. No, that's how we think they did it, and we are going to do it this way. I am going to do it this way. And when you get out of that, though, that's how they did it. You free yourself from thinking of the chains that you have to do it exactly the way they did it. No, you don't. You get to do it your way. And if you think they did it in 5 strokes and you can figure out how to do it in 2, do it in 2. Because our hands get tired, and the more efficiently we write our calligraphy, the prettier our calligraphy will be for longer. Or the more exact our calligraphy will be for longer, depending on how you want to think about it.
Ian, is it worth mentioning the position of the different shapes of the S?
Yeah, absolutely. Go right ahead.
Well, I'm sure everybody noticed on the top line of the S with the long S that the long S is followed by or preceded by a letter. So the long S would be used at the beginning of words or in the middle of words.
Right.
Whereas the short S, that's the ones
It's
that
terminal.
kind of is, yes, that's a terminal letter. So those would be used at the end. And then the ones that look like ribbons, I've only ever seen them at the very end of a word when the scribe was running out of room on the line and didn't have room for the number 6S, the short S, and it often appears as a superscripted S. So it's
Interesting.
floating above the baseline, but it's just kind of stuck in there because they didn't have room for it for the regular
So I can
S.
ask it.
Because it's narrower.
Mhm.
Yeah. So am I hearing something similar to like half an asset?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, it's an interesting thought. I again don't know. I have to go back and look at it. So something to analyze. So the letter T, it's fun. It's curved. There's no straights on it. Maybe the crossbar straight. Maybe. And as you can see, lots of ligature. But yeah, this stroke, as far as I can tell, is this first stroke of the T, that the backbone of the T is the same as the stroke here on the short S. It's the same as the stroke on the E, on your G. So, oh, R's are interesting. R's often look a little bit like X's, but what happens is that this is a ligature coming in. It's not really a part of the R. So you can easily mistake that for an X if you're just analyzing it by itself, but it's not. But yeah, it's an interesting, curvy, fun little thing. And then you have your half R's. And this particular person seemed to A, not care, or care a great deal about how they form their half R's. This one is all curve and some ink issues, maybe. This one all of a sudden is an ink blob and then ink fade. This one looks like it says Oz, but no, it's a half R that's very angular and then a curve. And then we have that angular and a curve as well. And so half R's, I think, are fun. I enjoy using them. But this first R stroke is not straight. It's kind of curved. And then they just kind of pull it over and stop, pull it over and stop, pull it over and stop. I don't particularly enjoy that R, so I make it differently. But I like the R. It's fun. I don't like writing it. My hand doesn't want to do that. As opposed to aesthetically, it's displeasing. My hand doesn't want to do it, so I'm not going to force it to. If somebody wanted an honest, faithful recreation, then yeah, I would. But I don't have to, so I'm not gonna. Because it's my Ductus. Remember that. It's my Ductus. Say that to yourself. So I don't want to continue going over every single letter. I want to get to the idea of, do you feel comfortable doing this on your own now? Because that's the point. The point of the class isn't this script. The point of the class is look at any script, including your own, analyze it, what is probably going on. And it's really easy when we're doing our own script to say, oh, I know what's going on, especially if you think you're a good scribe. Oh, I can just do this. I think that scribes that think that they're not good scribes are always constantly, criticizing themselves, but I don't necessarily know that they know how to critique themselves. Criticizing is easy, critiquing is hard. And if you're going to criticize, you better be able to critique. So if you're going to criticize yourself, you better critique yourself. Otherwise, stop criticizing yourself. Let somebody else critique you so you can do what you want and get to what you want to do, and they can help you, hopefully. This is about critiquing your work, critiquing somebody else's work that is dead, or critiquing somebody else's work that you're looking at because they've asked for help or because you want to learn from them. What's the pen angle? Right? What's the X height? How do we put it together? Those are the three things that a Ductus tells us. And since you are the person that's making the Ductus, you get to determine the pen angle. You get to determine the X height. You get to determine how they get put together. You have that power and authority to do that when you're making your own Ductus after you've analyzed something else. And it's really interesting to do to your own calligraphy. Don't do it to calligraphy that you just wrote necessarily if you're first starting to do this. You will eventually get to the point where you can. But look at calligraphy you did a month ago, a week ago, that you haven't handled in a while, and analyze it and see what you come up with. Not what was I supposed to do, but what did I do? It's an interesting question to ask yourself.